This is going to be episode 1 on bringing up boys. So, some of you are going to say, well, who are you and why should we listen to you? What I am is a mother who has had 38 years of experience. Am I a perfect mother? Absolutely not. I don't believe there's a perfect mother. I am a work in progress. However, I do have my degree in psychology. I did minor in child psychology, and I have been reading and reading and reading on bringing up children. I've been watching talk shows. I've been listening to talk shows. I've been watching YouTubes, and I've been listening to podcasts. I've been doing research. But most of all, I have been having children. I have one girl and one boy. And my girl is 38 years old. My daughter Rochelle, lovely girl. So I didn't have my son, Ryan, until my daughter was 25 years old. So I had quite a bit of time there with just raising a girl. And I had absolutely no way of knowing how I was going to raise a boy. I did have 2 brothers, and I did have a sister. But that didn't mean I knew how to raise them or really even to expect, because we were all 5 years in between each other. So, like, between myself and my youngest brother, there was 10 years. By the time I was even old enough to care, I was in high school, and he was just a little old fart. So I didn't really pay much attention to. I mean, I could tell you stories now of some little things that they did, but really, I was into my own life, and they, like I said, they were enough years younger than me that it didn't really faze me. Most of the time it was aggravating to me if I had to babysit, because they, of course, didn't listen to me. And a lot of times Mom and Dad came home and they were in trouble because they weren't in bed, and I tried to get them to go to bed, and of course they wouldn't, and you could hear them laughing and playing and doing their boy stuff, hiding in closets, trying to scare me, all that kind of stuff. So I knew a little bit about boys, but I didn't know what to do with them and really not what to expect of them. So when my little Ryan came along, there's a miraculous story about him, and that's going to be the beginning of my episode, and I will finish episode 1 with the story of how he came about, and then the next one, episode 2, will go on to as he's grown. So, back in 2001, I had a hypothyroid. I was working full-time, owned my own business, and I had a terrible bout of feeling lethargic, almost going into a depression. I wasn't depressed, but nobody could seem to find out what was wrong with me. And on a daily basis, I was becoming more tired, more lethargic, and I would go to the doctor, and they would, run all these blood tests and stuff and say, are you sure you're not depressed? I was not depressed. I know what depression is. Like I said, I did get my degree in psychology. I did not go on to become a psychologist. Reasons behind that. But at any rate, I didn't. So I'm not going to call myself that. But I knew what depression was. And I knew that I wasn't depressed. What I thought was that I was going to become depressed if somebody didn't hurry up and find out what was wrong with me. Anybody that knew me well knew that I wasn't a person to stay in bed. I wasn't a person to sit around. I was always on the go. I was always busy. And at this point, I couldn't get myself out of bed. I literally had to call my girlfriend after working all day and ask her to come over and help me to even get in the shower. So that's telling you how bad I was. And she finally took me to my gynecologist. And that was really for my annual exam. But when I started telling her how I'd been feeling, she decided to go ahead and do a thyroid test, which not one specialist that I had been to, out of the 3 doctors before her, had even mentioned my thyroid. In fact, when she said she was going to run some tests of my thyroid, I didn't even know what a thyroid was. Didn't remember if I was taught. But so it came back, and I don't know what anybody knows about thyroid, but your THS should be between 1 and 5. And mine came back 300 and some, like way over the top. And so she sent me directly to Dr. Meridian, who specializes in that. And when he got my results, he immediately started checking my neck. And I don't know if you know, but your thyroid is like right in here. You probably hear that my voice is a little deep, but like right here, I have a nodule that is pressing against my thyroid, which is what's causing my hypothyroidism. So when he found that, we of course had to stick a needle way down in there and pull some tissue out so that we could test and make sure that it wasn't cancer, which was a very scary thing. And thank God it came out that it wasn't. But I did have to start on medication. And I think the only good thing about that day was that I actually had an answer finally. And when he started asking me about all these symptoms of the thyroid, I really felt relief, because every symptom that I told him was a symptom of hypothyroidism. And I truly believed that I was going crazy until he said, yes, these are all symptoms of hypothyroidism, and I promise you when we get your levels out that you will feel normal again. And I really didn't think that I would ever feel normal again. It took almost a year to stabilize my medication and start feeling back to normal. About 4 months after I started feeling normal, I got pregnant. And again, it was my gynecologist. It was time for my annual again. And I went in and she's like, how you feeling, Christy? And I said, well, I was feeling really good, and now all of a sudden I'm tired again, so I'm a little bit worried that maybe my thyroid is getting bad again, or my numbers are off. And she said, well, we'll just go ahead and find out. And so we ran some blood tests. And she came back in and she said, your thyroid is fine. However, at 43 years old, you are pregnant. And I could do nothing but totally laugh, because for 25 years, my husband and I had tried after my daughter to have a child, and I was unable to. I had what they call endometriosis. I had 3 different surgeries so that we could have a child. The 3rd time I did get pregnant, but I miscarried in my first trimester. And so we decided that God just had decided that we weren't going to have any more children. And just concentrated on each other. My husband passed away, starting with an accident, falling off a bridge while he was working as an iron worker. And years later, I remarried. And the man that I remarried was happy with having the one child that he had. And my daughter, who was now a junior in college, and we talked about, do you want to have children? And he said, absolutely not. And so I said, well, no problem then, because I can't have any. Well, lo and behold, I end up having Brian. And to be honest with you, he was not excited about it to begin with. I don't know if he would like me saying that or not, but I'm here to be truthful with you. He had already told me, no, I don't want any other children. And I honestly wasn't concerned about that, because as I had said earlier, I had tried for 25 years and it wasn't possible. And I never did get on any kind of birth control or anything. So here I am, 43 years old, and I'm pregnant. And with a husband not happy about it. So really he didn't talk to me much about it, but I was quite excited. As far as I was concerned, God had given me a miracle. And I got a second chance at being a mother again. And so as weeks went along, I continued to work, and all of a sudden one day I started having contractions, and I was only in my 18th week. I rushed myself to the doctor, and she checked me, and I, yes, was having contractions, and so she immediately hospitalized me. Started out at Pekin Hospital, which, as anybody that lives in this area of Peoria knows, Pekin is a town of like 32,000. Our hospital is not big, and it is not equipped for huge emergencies like heart transplants or liver transplants. If babies are born before they're supposed to, they don't have the staff or the equipment for the neonatal. But that's where she put me for the time being. She was a doctor in Pekin, a lovely doctor at that, and she put me on a medication called MEG, which was to stop your contractions. That was not fun. When she first injected the medication in me, my whole body became extremely hot. And I felt like I was going to pass out. I got panicky. The feeling wasn't going away, and I kept saying, please just take it out, I can't stand it. And she said, honey, we can't. This is going to help you keep that baby that you've waited so many years for. And then she promised me that eventually that feeling of my whole body being so hot would go away. So it did, as she promised. And then I was at Pekin Hospital until I was 22 weeks. And a tornado came through town and set me right into labor, even on the make. And so after they stabilized us all that was on that floor, they took me by ambulance to St. Francis in Peoria, which does have the neonatalists and the doctors and nurses, the entire staff to take care of a situation like mine. So I was put on that floor at 22 weeks. So I still had a good 18 to 20 weeks to go yet. It was depending on how big the baby was, how far developed the baby was, and so on and so forth. But she kept reassuring me that she went into labor with both her kids at 18 weeks and 20 weeks, and they survived at 1.5 pounds and 2 pounds. That still was scary to me. Anyway, so St. Francis it was, and I was in a very small room with another girl at the very end of the hall to start out with, and was not allowed out of bed, and I was not happy. First of all, you turn on your nurse's light. None of us could get out of bed, so you turn on your nurse's light and you're waiting for somebody to come and put a bedpan under you, or some of them could, with assistance, go into the restroom or take a shower, as long as they had assistance. So you would have to, of course, ring the bell for that, and we would wait for 10 minutes, 15 minutes for somebody to even answer a call. I am not putting down the hospital itself. That floor is extremely busy, and the nurses are absolutely fantastic on there, but there's only so many of them, and can only do so many things at a time. So at any rate, it was still scary. I think I was in that room about 3 days when the girl got up and went to the bathroom, and all of a sudden I heard her start screaming, "Help me, help me." I'm having my baby, and I put my buzzer on and nobody was coming, and she kept screaming, and I took the chance and I got myself out of bed and wheeled my Nervenius step over with me to the hallway, and I screamed down the hallway for help. And they came down, and her baby was in the toilet. She, in fact, had that baby. That scared the crap out of me. So as soon as my doctor came in after hours that night, I said, "I want moved. I have to get out of here. This is too far away from the nurses. Nobody can hear you. Nobody's coming when we're pushing the buttons." And I cried like a big baby, and she finally said, "As soon as we get something, I promise I will put you in a private room and as close to the nurses as possible." And I think it only took about 2 days, and a private room opened up, and it was right next to the nurse's station. It was huge. It was like a suite, and that was better. But try being in bed with nothing to do 24/7 for 18 weeks. And I know that people have had it far worse than that, but it wasn't easy. I think, I had a lot of hormones going on, so I was probably a little needy, a little emotional. In fact, if my mom was here today, she'd probably tell you I was really emotional. But as the time went by, I did have my mother and my husband's mother that came and stayed with me every single day, and I can't even ever thank them enough for that. They brought me books, they brought me magazines, they played bingo with me, they had people come in to do my nails and to wash my hair and to give me facials and to rub my feet, and we talked and we sang, and we started watching Live with Regis and Kelly. She just started on the show. And they would get there about 9 in the morning and stay till about 5 o'clock every day. So 8 hours a day of their time they gave up for me. 5 or 6 days a week. And then my husband, bless his heart, as much as he could, would come up at night. He did have our son Tyler from a previous marriage. And he was 11, I believe, at the time. And I'm sure did not want to spend every night at the hospital. And so, even though he was brought in maybe once a week, those other 2 or 3 days of the week, they did stay home. So, my nights did get lonely. My husband introduced me to a new author. Now, don't take me wrong, he's not a reader, he knows nothing about authors, but he knew what kind of books I read, and so he went to Barnes & Nobles, and he said, my wife's in the hospital, and she needs some good books to read, and she likes murder mysteries. But she doesn't want stuff really deep like Stephen King. And so the lady said, I have got a great author she'll probably love, and there's a series of them, so you can get the whole series for her. And it was Iris Johansen, and the first book was Eve. So, if you like murder mysteries and you've heard of Iris Johansen, that's a really good series to start reading. So I would read her at night, and probably every night about 10 o'clock I would cry and cry. And sometimes the nurse would come down and say, what's the matter? And really, it was just the same old thing. I was tired of being in bed. I was tired of being by myself at night. And I wanted out of there. I felt closed in. Even though I had this big suite, I couldn't open a window. And I couldn't leave my bed. And that's just not the kind of person I was. So, yes, I was feeling sorry for myself. I talked to my doctor about it. I was concerned about not being able to stay in there that long and about becoming depressed. And so she sent a therapist in, and the therapist said, so we need how many more weeks to save this baby? And I think at that time I had like 12 weeks left, which may not seem like a long time to you, but when you've been laying in a hospital bed for that long, it's long, believe me. And I said, 12 weeks, and I'm not able to do it. And she said, okay, well, first of all, no, you're not going to be able to if that's the attitude you have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on that attitude. And I said, I don't have any strength to work on an attitude. I just want to have this baby, and I want it to be healthy, and I want to get out of this hospital, and I want to go home. And she said, okay, well, you're going to have to let that baby nest longer before you can have that baby and go home. So we're going to have to come up with something for you to change your mindset. So both of us kind of talked back and forth about what I could do that I wasn't already doing to keep myself occupied and to get myself in a different mindset. And she finally came up with the idea that she was going to bring some construction paper in the next day, and we were going to start cutting out little strips of paper and creating a chain to hang from my intravenous pole. And each day that I made it through another day, we would connect another chain link. And that would show me that I gave my baby one more day each time to live, to survive. And that worked for me. At the end of the night, when everybody was gone and I was alone, I would get that scissors out and I would get that paper out and I would put my little chain link on my intravenous and went, thank you, God. I got through another day. I gave my baby another day of growing and another chance of living. And I'd cry again. But I would then pick up my book and I would read and I would eventually go to sleep. Okay, so that went on through 38 weeks, and at 38 weeks, the neonatalist did an internal sonogram, and my son, which of course by all those sonograms we had no way of not knowing anymore what we were going to have. And at that time he was 6.5 pounds, and his lungs were fully developed, so he agreed that they could go ahead and take me off the MAIG and let me have my baby and finally go home. So exciting news, right? And they came in the room and they said, okay, the baby's doing good, you're doing good. If you want, you can call your husband. We're going to take you off of the MAIG and you're going to have yourself a baby boy. So I called my husband all excited, and I couldn't wait for him to get there so they could take that off and we could have our baby. So he came and they took it out, and my doctor said to me, don't be surprised if within 10 minutes we're in the delivery room. Because the entire time, even though they had me on the MAIG, I was still having contractions. I stayed dilated at a 2.5 all that time, so that wasn't going up, but I still was having contractions. They just weren't as bad. So here we go. We take the medicine off, and we have a contraction meter on, and I lay there for like an hour and nothing. No contractions. Nothing. How discouraging. And so I had remembered that when I had my daughter, many people told me that if I wanted to start my labor on time, that I should walk. So I looked at my husband and said, let's start walking these halls. And that's what we did. We walked and we walked and we walked, and nothing happened. So 6 hours after they took me off the medicine, my doctor said, well, looks like he didn't want to come out after all. So I'm going to go ahead and send you home and see what happens. Believe it or not, I went over. I was 41 weeks when my water broke. I was actually in the process of looking at a house to buy, and was with a realtor going up the stairs, and my water broke. Not real bad, wasn't real embarrassing. She was a female, so that was good. I said to her, I think we need to reschedule this. I just need to get to the hospital. My water broke. So I went back to our other house. Believe it or not, I vacuumed. I cleaned up the dishes. I packed my bag. I took a bath, shaved my legs. Got myself all prepared. Then I called the doctor because I still was not having any contractions. And she said, what the heck are you doing at home? Get to the hospital. So the one thing that I did promise my mom, because she was so concerned about me, was that no matter what, I would call her right away and she could come. So I did call my mom and tell her to meet me at the hospital. I did not bother my husband yet. I wasn't having any contractions. I wanted him to be able to continue to work until at least I started having contractions, and then he could take off and come. So that was about, well, by the time I got to the hospital, 1:30. My mom got up there about 2, and my husband got off work at 5, and so I had my mom call him and tell him where I was, and that he was free to go home and take a shower and stuff because nothing was happening. He got up there, still nothing was happening. Not that I wasn't having contractions, and according to the contraction meter, they were hard, but I felt absolutely no uncomfortableness or pain. In fact, I lay there and I read. I was so bored. My mom sat there and she read. And so then my husband came up for a while, and he decided to go back and get our son so he could be there when he was born. And they came back with a couple of gifts and still nothing. And finally, when I had been not exactly in labor, but my water had been broke for 26 hours, the doctor said, okay, we're going to have to take this baby C-section, otherwise the baby's going to go into distress and we could possibly lose her. So unfortunately, you're going to have to have a C-section. And I really didn't care at this point. In fact, all the babies that I had seen from a C-section had these perfect little round heads, and came out so good. So I was like, okay, that's fine with me. Just don't keep me out very long because I can't wait to hold that baby. So I had my baby boy, and he was very, very healthy. And that's all I'm going to tell you for now. That ends episode 1. Have a good day, and I love you all. Thank you for listening. Sorry it was so long. That's how I roll.